Thank you for your participation. Now we had a session by our distinguished speakers on what civil society's engagement in Afghanistan tells us about sustainable transformation and diversity. And now we're pleased to announce the start of the keynote. Ms. Kobayashi, the floor is yours.
Everyone, welcome to the session 3. Today, we're very honored and privileged to have 3 distinguished guests. I'd like to introduce one by one, the 3 of them one by one. First of all, Mr. Abdul Bashir Khaliqi, former director, thank you for joining us, the former director of Afghan National Association for Adult Education. And Ms. Helen Dabu, thank you for joining us. She's the Secretary General of Asia South Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education. And lastly, but not least, from Yokohama, I think joining us from Yokohama is Ms. Eri Yamamoto. She's the Secretary General and Country Director of Afghanistan Office of Shanti Volunteer Association. Thank you to the three of you for joining us today. And my name is Len Kobayashi. I'm the founder and chair of the board of United World College, ISAK, Japan, and I also serve on the board of Asia Pacific Initiative Foundation. Great. So today, we all know that the current status of Afghanistan, especially after the abrupt withdrawal of US troops in August. But that is not the only reason why we are featuring Afghanistan today in this plenary session. And rather, it is because we believe that there is a significant implication that we can draw from this very special part of the world, mainly for 2 reasons. Firstly, Afghanistan has been experiencing severe food shortage and insecurity as a result of doubling of population and climate change, in addition to internal conflicts and domestic wars. Secondly, Afghanistan is a very diverse country in many ways, so many ways. The population of the country consists of numerous ethnic groups. Am I right, Bashir? Like 80% of your population living in rural areas and 20% in urban areas. So the people are very scattered around across the nation. Yeah, and also I heard that there are at least 10 official languages that are spoken in Afghanistan as official language. Yeah, so it's a very diverse country. And then I think, in Asia, across Asia, we have that diversity in many countries, I think. So both challenges are, both challenges that we just mentioned are not unfamiliar to many of us in other parts of Asia. So today, we'd like to hear from the 3 distinguished panelists who have been working in Afghanistan for many decades and learn not only about their own work, but learn that the lessons learned from Afghanistan that can potentially be applied to other parts of Asia. Great. So without further ado, let's go go around the table, virtual table, and introduce ourselves. Bashir-san, can we start with you? If you can perhaps kindly introduce yourself and your work in Afghanistan in maybe 2 to 3 minutes, and if you could can give us some specific examples of your projects that the audience can understand your work with, that'd be much appreciated. Bashir-san, onegaishimasu.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening also to someone. To all of you, my name is Abdul Bashir Khaliqi. I'm the former director of the Afghan National Association for Adult Education, which is a national NGO working specifically in the field of literacy and adult education in Afghanistan since 2005. So that's almost for long. And now we are active in more than 12 provinces of Afghanistan, of course, in the central, in the north, in the west, and mainly in the cities, also in the rural areas. And also we provide our education courses for women and also for men, for those who are left from the school or those who are still in the school or out of the school, people who are 15 plus. So that is our target group, especially, our education services is provided on the non-formal or informal base. So that is where they need for lifelong learning. So that is what our focus is. And in addition, not only to the organization, I'll also burn when the war started in the country, because we have 40 years war. So I grown up in the war, I born in the war, and I grown up in the war, and I know my country, what has happened and what is happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bashir. And then am I right to understand that you are now outside of Afghanistan?
Yes, unfortunately, due to the recent development, there's political change, so we had to leave the country, and I'm now currently in Germany as a migration, just since 3rd November.
So you're calling in from refugee sort of facilities?
I'm really sorry, yes, I'm talking from a refugee camp now. Sorry for the limited access to the equipment and internet. I apologize. Thank you.
No, but thank you for joining us from that environment. Thank you. We truly appreciate it. Let's go to Helen-san, if you can introduce your work with ASPBAE and your work in Afghanistan.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Good afternoon from Manila, Philippines. I'm based here in the Philippines, in Manila in particular. I'm Helen Dabu, and I'm the Secretary General of the Asia South Pacific Association for Basic and Adult Education. It's a very long name. It's a long organizational name, but you can we can use the acronym ASPBAE.
ASPBAE, yeah.
ASPBAE is an independent regional network of more than 200 civil society organizations or NGOs and individuals operating in around 33 countries in the Asia Pacific region. We work towards promoting the right to quality education and lifelong learning for all, such as what Bashir has just described. And through the work of ASPBAE, we lobby and engage with governments to uphold the right to education as an empowering tool to combat poverty and all forms of exclusion and discrimination. We also enable active and meaningful participation of CSOs, of NGOs in education governance, in education policy processes, and we build a culture of peace and international understanding. Our members consist of NGOs, and in Afghanistan, we have around 6 NGO members in Afghanistan. We have had members for more than a decade now. ANAFAE, Bashir's organization, is our member. They have been our member in Afghanistan since 2007. No? So as far as our impact in Afghanistan, in the work that we do and the support that we provide in Afghanistan, what I can perhaps modestly and with all humility say as our contribution in the country is that we manage to support the formation or development of what we call National Education Campaign Coalition. So it's a coalition of local organizations in Afghanistan which try to promote and advocate for the right to education of all Afghans, and that includes children, youth, and adults. And they do policy advocacy for the right to education from the community level, national level, and even speaking in platforms such as at the Asia Pacific and global level. So we provide them that platform, and that is the role and support that we have been providing to the country, and particularly to our members in the country.
Thank you, Helen. So do you also provide a capacity building and training to your membership organizations?
Yes, exactly. So we provide capacity building, training workshop, both structured and unstructured. We also provide mentoring to local civil society organizations to enable them build their confidence on policy analysis for the right to education, on policy advocacy. How do you build relations? How do you engage governments, diplomacy, leadership? So those interrelated skills that can then build the skills and confidence of local CSOs in changing and transforming policies in the country towards education.
Right, thank you. That's a very noble work. Thank you, Helen-san, for the introduction. Lastly but not least, Eri-san, please. The floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. よろしくお願いします。I
よろしくお願いします。
must say I'm a little bit nervous because I'm the only one on this stage in Yokohama place. So I'm Eri Yamamoto from Shanti Volunteer Association, a Japanese NGO established in 1981. We work in the field of education, mainly Southeast Asia, but we also cover Afghanistan since 2001. So let me introduce a little bit about myself and how I was involved in Afghanistan. And I was an intern for Shanti Volunteer Association, one of our offices in Bangkok in 2001. And there I experienced the 9/11 at the time. And then at the time, I was quite shocked to see the scene on TVs. I think likewise, everyone was the same. And then that time, I was not imagining that if I would be involved in Afghanistan. But a few months later, from the September 11th attack, I was offered to be seconded to the UNICEF Afghanistan to be involved in education project. I think at the time, one of the biggest projects UNICEF ever implemented. And then when I was offered, I said yes on spot because I was really interested in seeing in Afghanistan, and I was really curious in how children were living in Afghanistan there. And then there I spent with UNICEF for almost a year. And then the Shanti Volunteer Association, ASPBAE, has decided to open the office in Afghanistan. Then I joined there. So at the time, I was supposed to be there only for 3 months. Then I was sorry for my family that I stayed in Afghanistan up to 6 years in living in Jalalabad. We did, in the past 20 years, we did construct schools for primary schools. I think we constructed 43 schools. We trained over 6,000 teachers, and we established 158 libraries there. We published the children books, 107 titles, and we distributed almost 200,000 copies of the children's books to the schools and the public libraries. Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Erisa, I think you brought some photos from Afghanistan, am I right?
Yes, sorry, I was supposed to tell you.
No, it's okay, it's okay.
Yes, so that was the girls and coming to our one of our library. Yes. Yes.
Great, thank you. Would you like to show 2 other photos that we prepared, or can we?
You can go ahead. Yeah, okay. I will show them later.
Later, yes. Okay. Great, thank you. Great. So one request to everyone in the audience: we will try to have about 5 to 10 minutes towards the end for Q&A. So if you have any question that would come up in your mind while listening to the speakers, please take a note, and we will have some time for you to ask those questions towards the end. Thank you. Great. So, Eri-san, so you shared with us that you lived in Jalalabad for 6 years, am I right? And you've been obviously following what's been happening in Afghanistan ever since then through your work and private as well, I think. But could you perhaps describe a few very drastic, most shocking, striking changes that you've seen over the years that you've been involved in Afghanistan?
Yes, I think there are many changes.
Many,
especially when I was there in 2002. Actually, I was in Afghanistan, and I was in Jalalabad, and then I saw nothing, absolutely nothing, because they just ended, I think, over 3 decades of war. And then I think now I had that, for example, Jalalabad to Kabul, the way is only 2 to 3 hours, I think 2 hours and a half. But at the time, and I had to spend almost 10 hours to travel from Jalalabad to Kabul. So for the cities, I think infrastructures is really developed in the past 2 decades. And compared to 2001, also their achievement in the country, I always say that it's too early to evaluate that how Afghanistan developed in these 20 years, because 20 years is really short when you think about that how many years they spent, in conflict situation. But definitely in this 20 years, we have seen some achievement. For example, like the maternity mortality rate, 1,500 out of 100,000 in 2001, but in 2015, reduced to 396 out of 100,000. And especially we worked in education, and in education sector, I think the big achievement, because at the time I can say almost no schools, even though 3,000 schools registered to the ministry, but I didn't see any schools opening at the time. But now there are 18,000 schools and 9 million students in 2001, but now 95 million students in 2020. And
wow, 9 million to 95 million?
Yes, and then 40%, almost 40% is girls. But when I was there in 2001, there was absolutely no girls in schools. Wow. So I can say, yes, there are some achievement in the past 20 years. Yeah.
Thank you. So you mentioned the infrastructure development and maternity mortality rate, and as well as education. Notable, very striking improvement in education, not only in terms of the numbers and enrollment, but also in girls' education and disparity. Thank you. That's incredible. Thank you. Bashir-san, obviously you were born and raised up in Kabul. And from your own perspective, what has been the most noticeable difference over those years that you were there?
Thank you very much, because you're asking me a 40 years story.
That's right.
And if you're a teacher, then you cannot stop talking. I mean, basically, looking to my lifetime, I'm almost now going to become 47. So when I born, the war started. I mean, I also started not from Kabul, but I born in Kandahar, where it is the capital. It's the capital of the Taliban, and where people living. I also grown up from a conservative people and become a progressive. So it takes me a long life to become like this. So I started from Kandahar, then my father passed away, I came to Kabul, and then start living in Kabul. But right when I was in the university, that was the Taliban time. So the previous government of Taliban, so the previous, in that time, I think there was a horrible time, you know about it, so I don't have to explain this. But at that time I was in university. So I did the country because I was in a different position. In the position means I was a normal person, where I'm very poor and very conservative. I didn't have anything to lose on that time. So I was accepting the time on that time because I think I said the God is sending it like this, and I have to accept it where it is like this. And so then when I grow up in the city, so city is normally a different environment, and it can also teach you something more, as she was explaining just before, the development. I can notice in the last 20 years, we had a huge development, as she was explaining, in terms of number of people in the school growing and so on. And looking to myself, in the last 20 years, I became totally a different person, because before 20 years, when I was in the university, I was asking ladies not to come to the university, because I was telling them, university is not a place for you. You should stay at home. Me, myself. But now I'm also encouraging my wife. I forced her to go to the school and then forced her to go to university. So that is totally different. So it means cities are a good place to develop, to be well progressed. But finally, when you are in that stage where you're progressed, we had a lot of achievement in the last 20 years. And we have built up so many Bashirs, other Bashirs, in the country. But unfortunately, when now again Taliban captured, all the last 20 years lost. So now we have, I don't see any more meaning of being in Afghanistan. So it is only lucky for few who had chance to leave the country, but unfortunately, most of us are still in the country and just trying to survive with the Taliban, which is almost very, very difficult because the way of their mentality, the way they want to live, I think this is horrible in such a century. So now what had happened is the last 20 years achievement, which was really big achievement, that was really wonderful for the whole country. So it is lost, and now there is a brain drain. Most of people are leaving the country, those who can. And instead, again, like other Bashirs, the old Bashirs, they are people coming in the cities, and they will start also a learning living, also to become in the next 10 or 20 years another Bashir. So I think this is how it is happening. But all in all, what is happening in the country is that stability is always affected. Mm-hmm. On top of the climate changes effect and so on, poverty is the key. As I could see in my life, poverty is really the key. And if we look to the poverty has its root. And the roots is going normally to for example, the climate changing, water system, irrigation system, and so other things. Geopolitical issue, which I don't want to go about this because there is a lot of regional interest and neighborhood interest to Afghanistan. You know about it because media is normally focusing on this. But climate change and a rural area, because as you also mentioned, more than 80 people living in the rural area with a poor condition, and they don't have anything to lose. Mm-hmm. So these are the people who are used now as a potential fighters. Because then, strongly the investment is on the Islamic and also the terrorist education in these rural areas. And these people is learning, and they are unfortunately misused for this. And that's all in all lead to the instability in the country, and the country will always be kept like this. So I think we really have to get out of this situation in the country. And the key thing is we have to build perspective for these people, especially for the rural area. I think this is the area we should really focus. We should really focus where the need is in order to bring them out from the poverty, like what they exactly need. Agriculture is the key in the rural areas. So we have to focus on that to build it up, like community irrigation system or solar system, something very much basic in order to allow them bring their income that they can survive. And then at least when they survive, poverty is reduced, and then they will not be misused for this conflict and war. And we should not forget, of course, these people also need education. One education for this, like if there is equipment or something would like to be invested for them, like for the community irrigation system or for solar system. But we should not also forget that focus how they should use this. And also they should become literate, because now more than 73% of our society is illiterate. And if it goes to the rural areas, it is more than 85%. So we should not forget literacy, adult education, and capacity building for them, that they should be able to live much better. And also they should not be misused as they are used now, or they have been used for very long. So I think these are my key, key points for my country. But if I continue talks, I think I will not stop. I think here I have to stop. Then I will listen from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bashir-san, for sharing that wealth of wisdom and obviously your insights from over 47 years. We're actually on the same age, turning 47 very soon. I think we touched on a very important point. Rural people in rural area, I think 80% of your population are not just rural, but they live in poverty, and also the illiteracy rate is very high. And agriculture used to be a main source of income there, but then now, because of climate change, that is changing very rapidly. So I think this population and climate change together, I think, is a very key point today. So we'll come back to that after we hear from Eri-san. So thank you for sharing. So I'm sorry, from Helen-san. So Helen-san, obviously you've been working with people in Afghanistan, but at the same time, we're sort of taking a step back and having a broader perspective from your Asian organization. Is there anything additional that you've been observing about Afghanistan, in addition to what Eri-san and Bashir-san mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I think first to say I can fully resonate with what Eri and Bashir have just described and have just shared, because both of their organization, ANAFAE and ASPBAE, are members of ASPBAE. So we also learn from the work that they do, and we take forward the lessons that they gain from the ground to the policy advocacy work that we do at the Asia Pacific and global levels. What I can perhaps add as a regional network of CSOs in the Asia Pacific region is that prior to the takeover of Taliban in August, there were really more opportunities to engage in improving education policies in the country. And that presented opportunities really to improve the education programs, education policies, education budget from all levels in the country, from the community level, provincial and national level. So there were those opportunities for NGOs, local organizations to really engage in education policy advocacy. So what we witnessed over the years is that there were vibrant developments and some level of progress, such as what was already described by Eri and Bashir, not only in education, but in other sectors as well. The previous context, and whenever we say previous context, that was before what happened in August. The previous context was really helpful in providing more opportunities for dialogue and action for education and development. But of course, what happened in August took everyone by surprise, and it has really put a lot of uncertainties in the work of many NGOs, CSOs, and that was already fully covered by Bashir. But at the moment, what I can also say, because there's still a lot of local organizations doing their important work on the ground, I believe ASPBAE remains and continues to serve on the ground. ANAFAE continues to serve on the ground. I think that is very important to put it in the limelight, that life continues regardless of the political context. And that also puts into perspective that education should be guaranteed and delivered regardless of the context. We always say that education should be free from politics. So even if the country is in a political uncertainty, even if the country is in internal conflict, education should be guaranteed to all. And that is, when I say all, it should be for all children, youth, and adults. And that's actually what our members have been doing. They really prioritize delivering and ensuring access to education of all, and most particularly the most marginalized, the poor, those in the rural areas, the people with disabilities, those in ethnic minorities. And I think that is something that we should not lose out in this kind of conversations. And it applies not only in Afghanistan. Yes, Afghanistan is one example where how do you ensure access to education of everyone, even in a countries as in a situation like in Afghanistan. But there are other countries in the Asia Pacific region which is also facing a lot of these complexities, a lot of these conflicts. In Myanmar, for example, even in my country, in the Philippines, we have pockets of internal conflicts here. But what we always say in ASPBAE is that education should not be undermined in all of these conflicts, in all of these contexts, and education should be guaranteed to all. And I think what I also want to add is that what we advocate in ASPBAE is that the broader concept of education. Education should promote peace. Education should build people's resilience. Education should protect the environment and build people's awareness on climate change, the impact of climate change. Education should prepare the people to face the different challenges of life and work, and this should be guaranteed in the broader aims and broader definition of the right to quality education for all.
Thank you, Helen. So it sort of reduced engagement from the community. It was very visible, I think, and noticeable after August. But you mentioned Myanmar, and as you said, Afghanistan is not the only country that is going through such a moment. From your past experiences, is there anything that we can apply to Afghanistan's current situation in building sort of that bridging that gap? I think that according to international media, Taliban is trying to legitimize their government through engaging other countries. How do we make that possible? How do we make that possible? Is it again re-engaging the community, re-engaging in the conversation with the government? How can we make that possible? From your experience in Myanmar, for example.
Yeah, I think what is important right now is the recognition that a lot of local organizations, many of them are independent and free from the control of government. So I think in a context such as in Afghanistan, in Myanmar, where much of the spaces are very restricted at the moment, it is very important for us, especially for ASPBAE and other organizations working not only at the national level, but also at the regional and global level, to give them that space to voice out what is happening in the country, such as this space that we provided to Bashir, for example, is a good space. This is a good example that we are having this conversation right now to surface all these issues. Because some spaces are not so present. This kind of free space are not present at the moment in countries like Myanmar and Afghanistan. I think we have to elevate the platform by which we can all learn from what is happening on the ground, and we as members of international community can then collectively come together and say, what can we do? So that has been the platform that ASPBAE has been offering to its members. We also have members in Myanmar, and so we organize these types of conversation for the local organizations to also say and express their voice and perspective on what's happening on the country and what the international community can do for them and help them during this time of difficult and uncertain future for their countries.
Thank you. So you're almost recreating what you created inside Afghanistan now, sort of outside of Afghanistan when it's safe, where it is safe.
Correct.
Right. Thank you. Bashir-san, let's come back to you. This sort of rural and climate change poverty issue that you were mentioning extensively earlier. For the majority of people who live in rural villages, at the moment, what is the most pressing need from your perspective? Now, you mentioned a lot, the poverty, education, agriculture, climate change. What is the most pressing need on the ground?
First of all, at this moment, what is the most pressing need is food. I mean, what the people are looking for it is food. And they are trying to and struggling to get food with any cost. It doesn't matter for them. Even now, at this moment, unfortunately, they are selling their children, which is really horrible. I mean, even you cannot see this, the videos which is now shared. I think food is the key. Hunger is really very high at this moment in the country. You know why? That's because also Taliban came, all our money is blocked and so on. So hunger, food, the people are looking for food, and we really have to do something to help them to have food, to have access to food. And like the humanitarian aid is the key at this moment. First of all, it's most important that the humanitarian need should be increased a lot by international, that it should reach to these poor people. Otherwise, it will be again a disaster. And it will become again, my country, I can see it will become like Yemen or maybe worse than Yemen very soon. So I think this is a danger. And this danger is not only, unfortunately, it's not only for the country itself, but that will also affect the neighborhood and also the other countries. Migration will be the high impact, so on. So I think we will lose a lot of life of the people. That would be really miserable. So I think food, humanitarian aid is the key at this, and that is, of course, short-term support at this moment, currently highly needed. But we should not forget that the short term, with the short term, at least we can stabilize a little bit the situation. But we should not forget that we have to invest on something that they should build their future. We have to make a sustainable life for them. And then the investment, we have to be careful on what we are investing. We have to first understand the community and we have to deepening the society, and we have to understand the context. Then we should invest something which is really necessary for them, which really build their future. As I was saying, like agriculture is one of the key source of income. Husbandry and so on. So I think we have to invest in this direction, that the people in rural area, like the water and irrigation is one key factor because of the climate change. They do not have access to enough water. So how to do or what to do, first of all, and how to do something like community irrigation system or some solar system, develop these issues that help these people to make, like, at least to manage the water more efficiently. Like, because the scarcity of resources is especially water. Land, we have enough land. There is enough land and there is enough people. But water is really a scarcity of resources. So we have to manage the water in such a way that it is used accordingly. And then also people should be able to learn how to use it and then to build up their living for longer period, because we have to bring them out from this poverty level. Otherwise, I think the country will stay like this, and it will be not only affecting or impacting the Afghanistan itself, that will impact the whole world.
And did you always used to need such irrigation system, or is it because of the climate change that the country is going through that now you're needing irrigation system?
I think it is both. I think the climate changing is one of the key factors, because that also, it's not only Afghanistan, I think many countries or most of the countries are affected. But Afghanistan is also highly affected. As I remember from my time, we had, in the winter, we had normally a lot of snow. But now, for example, last year we had only 1 time or 2 times snow. That is really, I mean, snow is one of the key sources of the water in Afghanistan, because it is 75% of our country is mountain. So you can imagine. So that needs a lot of snow, because snow is also reserved there. And during the summertime, it is melting, and then that is how we are receiving the water from. So it's mainly we are using the surface water. So now snow we have very much less snow, and with the less snow, then we have, of course, less water during the summertime, and spring and summertime. So even in spring, at least we have a little bit rain, but in the summer, then there is no water at all. So we need also, since we have the water is very less, so we need a mechanism, like from the other countries, maybe similar situation, how, especially with the developed countries, that I'm sure they develop a lot of irrigation system or machineries or something, that they try to build it up in such a way to make efficient use of the water, and to also reduce the water wasting, or using the water wasting. Like also the dropping system, in the irrigation, a dropping system. This type of system, I think, is very much necessary in a country like Afghanistan, that we use efficiently the small amount of water which we have in the country.
Thank you. So I think, as you said, climate change is not obviously not only affecting Afghanistan, but is affecting the entire world. So what you're facing today in Afghanistan will, happen or is already happening across Asia and beyond. So I think that we have a lot to learn from there. Helen, you work again in Asia region more broadly. Do you see any common thread here in terms of population, increasingly population and climate change and poverty alleviation in rural areas? Are there any common threats that you're seeing?
Oh, certainly. I think the challenges that we are seeing in Afghanistan, such as what Bashir has just described, you'll find so many commonalities as far as the broader contextual issues in the Asia Pacific is concerned. For us, the current period and the next decade will be significantly shaped and defined by the lasting impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the deeper and structural inequalities, the massive acceleration of technology amidst wide digital divides, the threats posed by climate change now and in the future, and the ever-present geopolitical challenges and threats to human rights and democratic systems in the Asia-Pacific region, fueled by conflicts, populism, fundamentalism, and polarization. These are the common threads. These will be the multiple challenges that many countries in our region, in Asia Pacific, will be confronting. But I can also say that the deeper and harder impact will be felt by poorer or developing countries in our region, such as what we're seeing in Myanmar, what we're seeing in Afghanistan, and other developing countries in the Asia Pacific region. So there are common threads, but we also need to appreciate that the impact will not be as severe as what we are seeing now in Afghanistan. So there are varying levels of impact, but the commonality is that those core challenges that we are seeing in the region. So I think the next question for all of us, not only for me and not only in the panel, but also in the audience, is how do we approach this? These are bigger challenges in society, in environment, and how do we do the work differently? And we cannot do business as usual also, and this is where I can perhaps offer my insights through the lens of education. We really need to use our voice as NGOs, as CSOs, and as business sector to protect and promote education for all. For our children, youth, and adults, because it is only through education that we will be able to support the people to overcome poverty and the challenges posed by climate change, conflicts, and other issues. We also need to expand and broaden our concept and definition of education, as I have been saying. In most cases, our understanding of education is rather narrow. It's confined to this realm of formal education system, the four walls of schools, basic literacy, math, science, English. We also need to open up our minds on the other systems or forms of education. One that serves the community and one that serves the people. How do they develop their life skills to respond to the issues down to the community level, such as what Bashir has been saying? How do you empower people to respond to issues of agriculture, issues of drought? How do they improve the water system? The people can do that, but we need to build their life skills, and that should be covered by the education agenda. And lastly, if I may be allowed, is just to put it into the perspective. The governments and the international community in 2015 agreed on the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the most important goals in there, all those 17 goals, there is a very, very important goal that cuts across all goals, and that is SDG 4, and that is on sustainable development goal on education. There are 7 targets there and 3 means of implementation. We don't have time to cover all those targets, but let me just pick and emphasize here SDG 4.7, target 7 of SDG 4. And it says, by 2030, ensure all learners acquire knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and culture's contribution to sustainable development. That is something that the world have agreed in 2015, and that is a goalpost that needs to be delivered by 2030. I think us in this audience will have to put that into perspective in everything that we do.
Thank you. You're right. I mean, I think even if you build in all this fantastic irrigation system, unless we educate the people to be able to sustainably maintain and make the best use of their systems, that is not going to do any good for, especially in terms of elevation of poverty, etc. So, yeah, I think education is one of the most important critical problems that we have to tackle in the region. Beyond Afghanistan. Thank you. So I know I'm a bit cautious of time, but moving into ethno-linguistic diversity piece. We spoke about a climate change and population problem on one hand, but I think the other aspect of Asia is obviously this very diverse culture and ethnicity. Iris, thank you for reading. As a foreigner, working in Afghanistan for many decades, what has struck you the most, and what is your experience from engaging with the Afghan people taught you about the diversity of culture?
Yes, thank you, Lin-san. I try to remember that the first time I started living in Afghanistan. I think living in Afghanistan was very difficult because I was at the time like late 20s and then young and single woman without a family. Living in Afghanistan is something unacceptable for their, that's their cultures or custom. I thought in the beginning I really need to build a trust with the community and the people. And Afghanistan, that at the time I had my colleagues living in a different area, different provinces, Kandahar, Mazar, Kabul, Herat. And when we talked to each other, then I think what we understand about Afghanistan was really different. Their image and then how the people live there, so even language. And so I thought we really need to understand deeply the country. And then what I tried was that where we rent for accommodation was really general house in a rural city, and with no electricity, no water, and then I tried to live in the same manner as Afghan peoples, and then even I wore the clothes, and then I even tried burqas, and I tried to first learn their life. And then there, I spent, instead of having a meeting, I spent 4 or 5 hours sometime to have a tea and then chat with the people, with the women and the communities. And then from there, I think slowly I found common issues or common things we may be able to understand mutually. And then I also learned that I think the values of life in Afghanistan was totally different from what I was grown up. So I thought first it's very important to understand their values, and then try to find ways to understand build a mutual understanding. So what I based in the eastern region, and then eastern regions, there are 4 provinces. So I tried to visit every district of these 4 provinces. And then there are even ethnic minorities and people who live there, even language, the way of their living, and then some living in the city, some living in 2,000 to 3,000 meter high mountainous areas, and some area women is working together with the men and less restricted, and some areas is very restricted. So I try to understand and then try to talk. So in the beginning, that we tried to introduce a picture book, which was very how can I say difficult at the time for them to understand the importance of one picture book, because they are against of pictures and drawing, and then they didn't want animals talking and stories, and so we have to discuss a lot, and we try to understand what they think about, for example, education or cultures, or how they want to bring the children up. Then we slowly build to understand. So for us, I thought we didn't think we can promote the libraries or picture books in Afghanistan. But now, I think 10 years ago, they accepted in the education policy even. And then there are many libraries in schools and spread it out in Afghanistan. So I think we have to sometimes change our approach region to region. For example, we didn't have different training package for Kabul and in the eastern region. So this kind of things that I learned a lot and working in Afghanistan.
Thank you. So understanding local context, cultures, and people is always a critical. I mean, it's a key in working out those situations, I think. Thank you. And then Helen, perhaps you obviously, again, you've worked in many different Asian countries, and I'd love to hear your insights as to what kind of advice you can give to us, who work in different Asian countries. But before that, I'm a bit conscious of that, and I promised the audience that I would entertain questions in the last 10 minutes. So if there's any question from the floor, we'd like to entertain that at this moment. And then I will go back to Helen-san to answer my question. どうでしょうか? Is there anyone from the audience who'd like to ask the question?
Yes, there is one. Yes, question from the floor here.
Could we pass the mic to him or her?
Yes.
So may I go?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hi. My name is Taejun. I'm doing microfinance in 5 countries, including Tajikistan, which is sharing a long border with Afghanistan. And I was there in August, and I'm also working in Myanmar, which just recently had a coup. And I again visited there in May. And there I was really surprised, or positively surprised by the resilience of Myanmar people who are still very hopeful about the future. So I just wanted to know from Abdul about how people are feeling there. Are they still hopeful or not? And another question is that what can a person like me do for the country? So thank you.
Thank you, Taejun, for that question, for those 2 questions. Bashir-san, would you like to entertain those 2 questions?
Thank you very much. Just quickly answering, we do have people who has hope. We do have people who doesn't have hope. People, especially women in our country, doesn't have hope because I think the development happened in the last 20 years. They fully lost it. So women's rights does not exist anymore. It exists, but from a different glass or angle, which it means doesn't exist. So women lost their hope. Men, they have still hope. But in general, if you look to the country, most of our people living in urban areas, they lost their hope. People who living in the very rural areas, they have hope because in the urban areas, they lost the development, what they had so far, what they built it up. In the rural areas, they got back the peace, access to them, because they were become marginalized for a long time, for 20 years, because of the war and conflict. I mean, I was fully people such as me or those who are working in the development sector were fully disconnected from them. So now with this peace, the Taliban came, I think one positive side is that it is peace overall the country. So access is to overall country. People can travel. So this is where have hope. So peace is a hope, but in the other side, poverty is not a hope, or this human rights violation is not a hope. So for like microfinance, for you, I think what you can do is microfinances is the key also. When they want to start something in the rural area, start some small businesses, some small entrepreneurship programs, or even irrigation or in the business, they need money. Of course, when they need money, they have to borrow because they don't have it. First of all, either the government should pay it, which the government doesn't have money, but they need to find it from somewhere. Now, if they want to find it out from the other people, they don't have also money. So microfinance is the key. I was witnessing in the last 20 years, but the microfinance was playing a key role in our country. With one, you have to be careful. I think you should wait for the policy of the Taliban because according to the Sharia law, this interest is an issue. So I'm sure this Islamic banking or something, they will try to sort out something, I think coming soon. I think once this issue is solved, but I'm sure at this moment of time, they will not allow you to do something in terms of the interest, to generate interest, because this is haram or it's forbidden in Sharia, but I'm sure they are clever enough to find out a way. There will be interest, but they might call it a different name. So I think you have to wait for it, but do not forget that microfinance is a very key, especially for the development of our country. And there will be a lot of chance for you there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we are doing the Islamic banking in Tajikistan, so maybe we can do there too.
That's very much.
Right. Thank you, Tajin-san, for that question and for Bashir-san for your question for your answer. There's another question from in the chat box. I think this one is for you again, Bashir-san. What kind of climate change resilience would you propose to the private sector? What kind of climate change resilience would you propose the private sector can contribute in Afghanistan and in the wider Asia?
As I was stating when I was talking, I think climate change, it is worldwide. It's impossible to cut from Afghanistan. But what I was saying, I'm just repeating. Efficiently using of the water is one key that private sector can invest in this. In Afghanistan, we have huge possibilities. Like water dams, small, medium, big. I think big dams, small dams, and medium dams. The dam building is also another key factor you can invest on this. I think there is a lot of huge survey has been done in Afghanistan, and we have huge possibility in Afghanistan. Not to forget, I studied civil engineering, so that's why I know a little bit of this. So the water dam is an issue. And then solar system is another key that you can also invest in because we have, unfortunately, we have sunshine, a lot of sunshine, but unfortunately, we don't have raining. But having more sunshine from a positive point of view, it means the solar system is more useful in Afghanistan. Solar energy is another point that you can invest and you can do something. And because all in all will also support or build up the agriculture system in Afghanistan. So once we have more greens, once we have more trees or more this, I think this will also somehow impact the climate changing, because then we will have normally more greens, and more greens, more trees, it will also bring more oxygen in it. So I think these are the directions: the water dams, solar energy, and this irrigation system, this small community irrigation system. That is the direction where you should focus.
Thank you, Bashir. And again, and this is not only for Afghanistan, but for wider Asia, I think has a lot of implications. Thank you. So I know we have only 2-3 minutes left. Sorry, 1 minute, I'm told. So perhaps maybe a few words from each one of the panelists with regards to what has been your biggest lesson learned, that can be applied to other Asian countries, based on your work in Afghanistan over the past decades. Maybe Eri-san, would you like to start? And then we'll go to Bashir-san and then Helen-san.
Yes, thank you very much. So I think this time, definitely the biggest difference, the situation compared to the 20 years ago, I think there are lots of people on the ground in Afghanistan. They are capable to still run the business or even humanitarian aid work. And then, so how we keep a relationship, how we be connected to Afghanistan or those people is, I think it's very important that despite the political situation is unstable, I think we can find ways to be connected. And then another issue is for example, like the case of Japan, that Japanese government spent 5-8 billion yen to build the capacity of the Afghan people. So 600 students are invited to universities in Japan, and then they are educated or they develop the capacity. So those before these political changes worked in the government. That's a very high rank the positions and or universities, but these people are now no jobs, and then even some of them are even evacuated in Japan. And so I also think that one another key is how to keep those human resources and for the future of Afghanistan.
Great, thank you, Eri-san. Bashir-san, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, thank you very much. I already talk a lot about that. All in all, I would say also, I'm also very happy that this conference also made us a chance to talk. But all in all, what I will say is, please do not forget Afghanistan. I think if Afghanistan is, like other countries, it's also geographically located in a place where it is normally in the whole history that was an interest of regional countries and so on. So it is geographically, unfortunately, both is located in a place where it always become an interest, not only for the country itself, but for the neighborhood as well. So I think I would suggest that do not forget our country, because please try to support as much as you can. At this moment, see most focus from a positive point of view, see what happened. Even with this collapse, what is positive in this collapse? Like peace and security is there. So try to use this, at least for the foreigners, it's not a risk. For us, forget about it. But for the foreigners, it's not a risk. Try to use this opportunity of peace. Try to invest as much as possible, whatever direction you have and you have the capacity. Afghanistan is not anymore the country of the 20 years ago. There is a lot of development happening. People has a brighter mindset. There is a better understanding. And all in all, there is a huge potential for receiving you, helping you. Afghanistan is a country where it is, with the hosting, it's one of the famous countries. We are really a good hosting country. So I think you will love it going there. So I think don't only focus on media, because media only focus on something which they can sell, but go there, find it out. It is now peace, and try to invest as much as possible. And there is a huge potential for you to work there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bashir-san, for joining us today. Helen-san, we have we're a bit over time, but final words from you.
But just to say that it has been a pleasure to share this space with you, Lynn and Eri and Bashir. I echo the points that they have offered, and perhaps what I can say very quickly is that we should recognize that change and transformation takes time. So many issues that we are confronting today have developed and reached this point because of the decades and years of practices and actions that resulted to all of these contextual issues, climate change, pollution, conflicts, etc. This cannot be easily reversed or resolved if we don't also put the necessary transformative actions now. So we in ASPBAE come back to the value of transformative education and lifelong learning for all. We believe that education can play a critical role in addressing so many of societal, economic, and political issues, but we need to ensure that education is protected and it remains a priority of governments and the international community. With that, thank you so much, and it has been a pleasure to be in this panel.
Thank you so much, Helen, for that summation. And again, I think all the challenges that we spoke about today are not only for Afghanistan. And I think if you can believe in that, I think we should really join forces to address the challenges there, so that we can then apply lessons learned in Afghanistan to other parts of Asia as well. So thank you very much for Eri, Bashir, and Helen again for joining us today. And thank you everyone in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
Thank you to all the speakers for inspiring session. Now we'll take a break and resume at 5:15 Japan Standard Time. Thank you for your patience.